Hello again, my lovely grandchildren, and welcome to another story by Nana, your storyteller. I'm here to record for you a story that we've all heard together before. I remember going over to your house over the summer, and we sat on your nice covered deck, and it was a lovely, warm summer afternoon, and I told you the Tale of Delgadina. And I actually recorded this twice yesterday, wearing my storyteller hat. Yesterday was a Broncos cap. And then I realized that this story has a witch in it. And it's being told to you right around that Halloween. And so I decided that I would go get a witch's hat. And I actually borrowed it from you guys. So you'll be able to see that. So this is the Tale of Delgadina, and it doesn't have a recognized author, and it doesn't have a recognized creation day or date. But we do know that the story takes place in Chile. And when I told you this story over the summer, we looked at our blow-up globe. So I brought that out today to talk about it again. So we see here, this is the United States of America, and it's part of the continent of North America, the North American continent. And so north is up, south is down. So if you travel south from the United States, down through Mexico, to the continent of South America. And here's the continent of South America. And here is the Pacific Ocean. And right along the Pacific Ocean here is a long, long yellow country, and that is Chile. It's bordered by Argentina on the east and the Pacific Ocean on the west. They have a lot of beaches in Chile. And so I think I'm ready to tell you the story. I got a couple jokes too. And the jokes that I had yesterday were not very good. And so I went online last night and I found some new jokes that I thought you would really like, especially for Halloween. It says, what do you call two witches that are living together? You would call them broommates. Ha, get it? Broommates as opposed to roommates? Yeah, there we go. And then how do you fix a cracked pumpkin? You fix a cracked pumpkin with a pumpkin patch. Ah, funny, funny. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start my story. And here is the hat, the lovely witch's hat, that I borrowed from you just this morning. And this is for the Tale of Delgadina. Delgadina was a little girl about your ages, and she was playing in the forest, and she found a little red snake, just very little, and she started playing with it and decided to take it home because it was a good playmate. And so she took it home and she played with it all day. And when it was time to go to bed, she fed him, and she found a little box, wooden box, that she painted all colorful colors. And she put the little red snake into the box, and she put the box carefully under her bed for the night. Well, the next morning, when Delgadina woke up and pulled that box out from under the bed and opened it up, inside, the little red snake had grown to 3 times its size. It was 3 times bigger than it had been the night before. When Delgadina told her mother about the snake growing, her mother said, "Oh, daughter, I believe that this is a magic snake, and you will need to take very good care of it." Which, of course, Delgadina did, because she was a nice little girl and a loving little girl, and she liked that snake. So she continued to play with it every day and feed it every day. It wasn't very long, though, before the little red snake was almost too big to fit in Delgadina's bedroom. So Delgadina's mother said, "Darling daughter, The snake is too big to stay in our house now. You'll need to let him go live in the forest. So Delgadina called, Little Red Snake, Mommy says you need to go live in the forest because you're too big for our house. And so she watched as the little red snake, slithered out of the house and through the forest. And then she watched as he slid into a big cave. And so now she knew where he was going to live, and she was able to visit him every day and bring him food and play with him. And she was never afraid of the little red snake, who was no longer little. Even though he was so big, she was never afraid because he was always very gentle and caring with her. And so she was never afraid of being hurt. Well, pretty soon, he was getting so big that he required a lot of food. And Delgadina's mother said, Daughter, we're just too poor. We can't afford to continue to feed your snake. Plus, I think he really would be happier if he lived in the ocean with other snakes and other ocean-going creatures. So Delgadina sadly went to the mouth of the cave, and she called again, Little Red Snake, Little Red Snake. And Little Red Snake came and surprised Delgadina by opening his mouth and speaking to her in a voice that was human and in a language that Delgadina understood. He said in a nice, deep, sonorous voice, Delgadina, what is it you need? And Delgadina, she was very sad, but she was also very happy to hear that he could talk to her. She explained to him, she said, Little Red Snake, Mommy says that you would be happier if you lived in the ocean with other snakes and other ocean creatures. And so she thinks that you should go live in the ocean, and that makes me so sad. And the snake said, Delgadina, your mother is right. It is time for me to go. But you have cared for me so lovingly that I would like to leave with you a gift. Oh, said Delgadina, that would be wonderful. What is it you want to leave for me? The snake said, Delgadina, take your hands and rub them over my eyes 3 times. And so Delgadina did, because she always followed directions because she was a good little girl. And the snake said, from now on, when you wash your hands and shake them dry, gold coins will fall from your hands. La Delgadina thanked the little red snake and watched him as he gracefully slithered through the forest and into the ocean. Many years passed after the little red snake went into the ocean, and because of his kind gift, Delgadina and her mother became very wealthy from her shaking all the gold coins from her hands, and they lived very comfortably. Luckily for the people who lived around them, they were as kind and as generous as they were rich. And so when neighbors were in need, Delgadina and her mother would always help them. And so pretty much everybody in the village and in the surrounding forest loved Delgadina and her mother. But there was one person who did not. And this was an ugly old witch. Yes, she was jealous and mean. She hated the good magic that the snake had left upon Delgadina. And she hated Delgadina for her kindness and her beauty and her generosity. And she was determined to get even. While all this was going on, the king of the country, who was a nice-looking young man, he needed a wife, and he had heard stories about a beautiful young woman named Delgadina, who was kind and generous, and who also could shake gold coins from her hands and he thought that she would make a wonderful queen for him. So he really wanted to meet her, but he didn't know how. He didn't know her people, he didn't know her family, and he didn't know how to go about meeting her. Well, the witch heard about the king's desire to meet and marry Delgadina, and she determined that instead of Delgadina marrying the king, that the witch's daughter would be put in Delgadina's place and would marry the king instead. So the wicked witch went to the king, and he did not know her. He did not know that she used black magic and that she was mean and jealous. He just knew what she told him, which was, "King, I know Delgadina, and I can bring her to you if you give me what I want." And the king was excited because he really did want to meet Delgadina. And he was happy to give the old woman what she desired. He said, what is it I can get for you to help you get Delgadina to me? And she said, "I want a golden coach, and I want 4 white horses to pull that coach." He said, "No problem. I'll be happy to give you that coach and the horses." She said, "One other thing. I want you to give me a gown of the finest cloth, and it will be covered with diamonds and pearls, and I will have Delgadina wear it when I bring her to you." Well, the king gave the old woman everything that she asked for, and off she went. But she didn't immediately go to Delgadina's house. No, instead, she went to her house, and she gathered her daughter, her ugly, bony, mean daughter, and she dressed her in a gown of diamonds and pearls, and she covered her with a dark cloak and put her in the carriage, into the coach, and hid her away. And then they went off to Delgadina's house. Well, Delgadina's mother was out front of their house, and she saw the golden coach drawn by 4 white horses coming down the road towards her home. She was thrilled. She figured, this must be a coach from the palace. This must be the king's coach. I wonder where he's going. And sure enough, the coach pulled up right in front of her house. She was thrilled. The old witch jumped down from the driver's seat, and she came up to Delgadina's mother and said, "The king wishes to marry your daughter." Well, Delgadina's mother had heard about how generous and kind this king was, and how he wasn't too bad looking either. And so she immediately went into the house and broke the news to Delgadina. Delgadina was happy. She figured it would be a good deal for her too, and so she was willing to marry the king. So she put on her best gown, and she climbed up into the coach, and her mother was getting ready to climb up into the coach just behind her. And the wicked witch said, "Stop, we'll come back for you in 2 weeks," because she didn't want Delgadina's mother to go along. She quickly shut the door and locked it, climbed up back onto the driver's seat, and whipped the horses into a gallop, and off they sped. Delgadina's mother did not realize that the coach was going in the very opposite direction of the palace. She was still so excited at the news. But it wasn't long before Delgadina herself realized that they were going in the wrong direction. And so she reached forward to knock on the window between the coach and the driver's seat. And as she did so, she caught, on the corner of her eye, she caught sight of the bony, ugly girl in the coach with her, covered with a black cloak, and it was so creepy. She almost lost her nerve to knock on the window, but she went ahead and knocked anyway, and She was saying, "Driver, driver, you need to stop and turn around." Well, the Wicked Witch did not stop the coach. She did not turn around. She whipped those horses into a faster run, and they were going up and up and up this hill, and they finally got to the very top of the hill, which was the highest point of the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Well, the witch stopped the coach and jumped down and unlocked the door, grabbed Delgadina, and dragged her from the coach. She dragged her over to the edge of the cliffs, and as she was standing there, she took her long fingernails. Nana doesn't have long fingernails, but the witch did. You'll have to use your imagination. And the witch used her long fingernails and pressed them into Delgadina's eyelids, and then threw Delgadina over the edge of the cliff and into the ocean. She got back into her coach and began the drive back to the palace with her daughter dressed up as Delgadina. While the witch was doing all this, the palace was in a furor. They were so excited to have a royal wedding going on. There were banners flying and colorful flags all along the parapets of the palace, and all the best tapestries and rugs were brought out. They even had a real long red rug carpet that they strung from the palace all the way down to the road, so that when Delgadina pulled up, that she would be able to enter the palace on that red rug. And when the gold coach pulled up in front of the palace, and the bony, ugly daughter of the witch stepped down from the coach, the king was shocked. He had heard that Delgadina was a beautiful young woman, and this young woman was not very nice looking on the outside. But then he thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe everybody who was talking about how beautiful she was meant that she was beautiful on the inside. And really, that's a more important thing than beauty on the outside. So I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But he said, I still do want to verify that she is actually factually Delgadina. He knew that Delgadina should be able to wash her hands and shake gold coins from them. So when the witch's ugly, bony daughter got to the top of the stairs to meet the king, he said, "Delgadina, I understand that this may have been a dusty ride for you. We'll be marrying and then dining, and I wonder if you would like to wash your hands before we start." Well, the witch's daughter knew that if she washed her hands and shook them dry, she'd be caught. She thought very quickly, because even though she was ugly and bony, she was a pretty clever girl. So she said to the king, "I only wash in the mornings." Well, the king couldn't really argue too much with that, so they went ahead and got married. And by morning, the king was very sorry to have gone ahead with the marriage. He was not happy with this woman that he'd married. She was mean, and she was spiteful, and she was ugly on the inside as well as the outside. He watched hopefully as she got up out of bed that next morning and washed her hands and then shook them dry. When she shook them dry and no coins fell from her hands, the king thought he had caught her. He jumped up and he said, "No coins fell from your hands." And again, the witch's daughter was very clever and quick, and she said, "It must be your fault. I've slept with you one night, and now all my powers are gone." Well, if this was true, the king owed her a great debt, so he decided to stay married to her. Unfortunately, while all this was going on, Delgadina in the ocean was washed up on the shore of a small island, and she couldn't see. and she was very ill from being in the ocean and the water for so long. And as she lay on the beach, she was found by a kind shepherd that lived on the island. And he picked her up and he carried her back to his hut. And he took care of her and made sure that she had everything she needed to get well, which she did. But she was so sad from all that had happened to her and everything, all the mean things that had happened, that she found she couldn't talk about it. Still, she was grateful for the care that he'd shown her, and so she cooked for him and cleaned for him and washed his clothes and took as good a care of him as she could. And every night, every evening, she would go down to the shore and she would stand at the edge of the ocean and she would sing a song. And the song went like this. I wish my mother I could see, but she is very far away, somewhere across the sea. Well, one evening, as she sang the song, she heard a noise in the surf. Then she heard a voice that she recognized. The voice was, yes, the voice of the little red snake. She heard him say, "Why, Delgadina, I heard your beautiful song from across the ocean, and I came to ask you whatever has happened to you." And Delgadina, she reached out her hand and she put it on the snake's face and she said, "Oh, little red snake, I'm so glad that you're here with me. I've missed you terribly, and so many bad things have happened." And she began to tell him everything that had occurred and had caused her to be on this island and to not be able to see. Well, when Little Red Snake heard the story, he said, "Why, Delgadina, I can heal you." She was so excited. He said, "Delgadina, take your hands and rub them over my eyes 3 times." And so she did, 3 times. And then he said, "Now, Delgadina, rub your hands over your own eyes 3 times." And so she did. And as soon as she lowered her hands, miracle upon miracle, she could see again. Oh, she was thrilled. She was so happy. She said, "Oh, little red snake, you've made me well again." He said, "What I want you to do now is wash your hands and shake them dry with enough gold coins for the shepherd to live happily for the rest of his days. Then I'd like you to thank the shepherd and then climb upon my back, and I will swim with you and take you back to your mother's home." Delgadina was happy to wash her hands and shake them dry and provide the shepherd with enough gold to last him a lifetime. And she thanked him profusely for his care, and he thanked her for the gold and for the stories. Then she climbed on Little Red Snake's back, and he swam with her through the ocean all the way back to Delgadina's mother. Such joy upon their reunion. Oh, they laughed and they cried with joy. They were so happy to be back together again. And of course, all their neighbors, everyone who lived in the village, in the forest, were so glad to hear that Delgadina had returned as well. Because remember, they all loved her, except for that wicked witch. Well, it wasn't long because news travels pretty fast. It wasn't long before the king heard that Delgadina had returned. And he decided that he would have to be extra clever to catch the witch and her daughter in their lie. He didn't know what to do. He thought and he thought. Finally, he decided that he would have a great feast in honor of his new bride. And the wicked witch's ugly, bony daughter was happy to have a feast thrown in her honor. The king had it all planned out. He went to his chefs and cooks and he told them, now I want you to cook only finger food, only food that people can eat with their fingers, and I'd really like it to be as greasy as possible. And then he went to the housekeepers and he told them, now I don't want you to put out any towels for people to dry their hands on. You see where this is going, right? You remember? So they had their feast, and the king had invited everyone from the land of Chile. And so everyone came, including Delgadina, which was what the king was really hoping for. Even though he didn't recognize her, he didn't know who Delgadina was, but he figured as soon as everyone was done eating and washed their hands and shook them dry, he would find out who the young woman Delgadina really was. And that's what happened. They all drank and ate their fill, and they all got done, and they were washing their hands and shaking them dry. And when Delgadina did that, and gold coins fell from her hands, the king was so excited he jumped up from his seat and he said, Delgadina, at last! Well, the wicked witch heard the king and saw what was going on, and she figured the jig was up for them. So she grabbed her ugly, bony daughter by the wrist and ran out the palace doors and down the steps. She said, we're getting out of here, daughter, but we're not going empty-handed. And so they jumped. She pushed her daughter into the coach and jumped up on the driver's seat, and away the coach went down the road. Well, the king was so happy to be done with the wicked witch and her ugly bony daughter that he stamped his feet 3 times really loud. And the ground shook all the way down to the bottom of the ocean where Little Red Snake, who was not little anymore, was sleeping. And he woke up from the vibration of the ground, and he looked up above him, and he could see right at the edge of the road, right at the edge of the ocean on the road, he saw that golden coach with 4 white horses pulling it, traveling fast down that road. And he knew that it was really a wicked witch inside. So he started moving, and he started digging around in the dirt, and he started pushing his way up. And by the time he got next to the surface, he popped up above the surface, right in the middle of the road, right where that coach was traveling, and the coach was blown to smithereens. The wicked witch and her ugly, bony daughter were never heard from again. The king and Delgadina were married that very day. And whenever they had questions that they couldn't answer or problems that they couldn't solve, they would stamp their feet really loud 3 times, and Little Red Snake, who was not little any longer, would come and help them figure out the problem or answer the question. Delgadina had a little gold crown made for the Little Red Snake, and together the king and Delgadina and the Little Red Snake ruled the country wisely and generously and kindly. And because they were generous, everyone in the whole country lived happily ever after. And that's the tale of Delgadina. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed telling it to you. Did you notice that I'm also wearing my skeleton earrings? It's just about Halloween, 2020. And 2020 has already been so scary, but I decided that since there was a wicked witch in this story, it would be fun to wear a witch's hat. Thank you for letting me borrow it. Now, I'm only going to tell this one story today because it was kind of a longish story, but you will find it on YouTube, and you can watch it as many times as you want. And hopefully, you'll learn it. You'll hear it so often that you'll learn it well enough for yourself that you can tell this story to someone else. Thanks for watching. I love you, and have a happy Halloween. Bye.